little background for everyone else on the call. Our biobank came from probably the worst possible situation to go to OpenSpecimen. We came from an Microsoft Access database that was originally built from Foxtrot in, I think, 1996, and then migrated over to Microsoft Access in early 2000 something. So it was just an utter mess. So by the time that we wanted to go to OpenSpecimen, there was a lot of data issues, and actually implementing OpenSpecimen was a big problem on our end just because of what we had. So we were really excited to use OpenSpecimen because of all the functionality that we previously were pretty limited to. But we weren't used to all of those things. So, and it didn't really help that we had over 25 or 250,000 specimens to really keep track of at that point. So I think Dinesh really did a good job of doing his best of trying to migrate all of that data, but part of our problem with OpenSpecimen, I think, was just figuring out what needed to go where. For instance, within the Access database, there was no visits. You couldn't parse out when a specimen, not necessarily when a specimen was collected, but within the OpenSpecimen hierarchy from a participant to a visit, then to a specimen record. Because there was no visit within our previous database, it was very difficult to do. So as far as implementation, that has been something that is something you want to keep in the back of your mind if you do not have that in your current database.
Coleen, you can use a test study and the test patient to show, so that way. And I would like to add a few things, what just Coleen said. As we migrated from Access database, it was more challenging. And since our repository was something that has started back in 90s, so they have been collecting data, but not in a more structured way. It has been, they've done good job in collecting the data, that's for sure, but people over the time have been collecting in their own manner, like there was no proper structured manner. So that was more challenging in order to feed the data into OpenSpecimen. And Neha from OpenSpecimen, Krishnika, also helped us with some of the specimen mappings and migration. So at this point, we are at least 70 to 75% close, where we can say most of the information is being migrated. But there are two things to remember. With a huge repository as ours, the migration and the cleaning is going on the data that has been collected over the years. But then also information that's coming in live. The day-to-day operation also has to carry along with the cleaning process. So people like Coleen and a few others from BioSpecimen repository team have come up with standard SOPs, and they're still trying to work on some more SOPs so that moving forward, at least we can collect the data in more structured and meaningful fashion. Because at the end of the day, whatever information we collect, we would like to get the numbers, and the researchers would like to see the numbers and put those numbers or use those numbers for their publications or poster presentations or for application of future grants. So if they are not able to get those numbers, then all this data doesn't make any sense. So at this point, actually, a few months ago, if we queried anything on our instance of OpenSpecimen, the numbers that came out didn't make any sense, which Coleen knew right away, and that's where we started a more QCing process. And at this point, again, as I said, we are still 70 to 75% there, and still there is some more cleaning and structuring that needs to go in. So that's something that I would recommend people who are going to adopt, or even people who are thinking to come up with their own SOPs would need to think about visits and structuring their information, whatever their source might be, maybe Excel files, CSV files, Access database, or some other system. They have to think about that, and also accommodate some time for making those things. And we would also be happy to share one of the grids that Coleen has come up with. So as soon as we knew there are issues with our migration process, initial migration process, then Coleen came up with this structure. So what this says is, so this is basically how OpenSpecimen is being built. I don't want to take a lot of credit for the build and other stuff, but I want to say Coleen did a great job in understanding the structure behind. So every participant or every visit or every specimen is being linked in this tree structure. So there is a HSC or a protocol, and within a protocol there are participants and multiple participants, and then again a single participant could be connected to multiple protocols. And within a participant, again, there could be one or multiple visits, and within a visit there could be one or multiple specimens that could be collected. And if this is something that's being changed within OpenSpecimen also. So we adopted version 1.3 initially to begin with, and that was something CA Big did it, and so things were a little different. But when we went to 2.5, things were more streamlined. But then in order to add visits or collect specimens on the fly, we added few templates. So by default, visit 1 shows that we have to collect 10 specimens or 15 specimens, and then it says already what are those different things. So for suppose now Coleen is, you can go into the test patient, Coleen.
Should be able to do it this way too.
Okay.
So these are versions of templates for this one particular study. This is an active study with active patients. What I do like about OpenSpecimen is creating these templates takes virtually no time. So this one I actually created this morning in under 5 minutes. And to create all of these templates probably took maybe 20 minutes at most, because you can create your initial visit, which is probably pretty standard for whatever you're using, and then creating the rest of them is simply, you can't see it. Well, we'll come up here. You can just copy an event. So we'll just say this is the 19th. Draw. Add it. And now every single thing that I put in previously is already there. So that makes creating an entire study extremely easy. And since I'm not a computer programmer, that makes my life nice. Instead of going back to Dinesh and asking him a whole bunch of questions, I can do it on my own rather quickly. Let me delete this before I forget. The other thing that I really like about OpenSpecimen, especially since I'm not a computer programmer, is a lot of what the information that Dinesh needs on the back end is right in the URL. So say I'm looking for this particular patient in this particular collection protocol. The collection protocol, the code list is right there. The participant ID is right there. Visit is right there. And now I have a specimen ID right in the URL. So if I need to, I could send Dinesh literally the URL, preferably parse it out for him so he doesn't have to read my mind, so that he can find out what I'm looking at if there ever was a problem. It is convenient that there's also sort of this function too, but you can communicate faster what your problem is, knowing those things that they're going to be looking for in their SQL scripts or their back-end development on the development database when you know what they're looking for. So I do like that. And I do like the query tool, how quickly that it works, and especially the specimen catalog as well. So.
And as we have adopted, but we migrated to this version only in the January 2016. So we are still exploring some of the other things or features that we can do within OpenSpecimen, like distributing the samples or dispensing the samples. So it does have the potential, but we are not, at this point, we are not using it to our the complete potential. That's something that we are always evaluating and trying to explore and use those features. So that would still be something that we would continue even in the future to see what are the other stuff that we can do.
Yeah. As far as dispensing samples, I'm not a huge fan about how it works. It just seems rather complicated to go through. For instance, you have to create these specimen carts, then put a specimen in it, then assign it a distribution protocol, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, it just seems to be a lot of clicking to get to the same information that you could store rather quickly somewhere else. But I think that that particular workflow within OpenSpecimen could be more streamlined, just in general. Does anybody have any particular questions at this point?
Yeah, Colleen, this is Purnima again. I have a question. So about dispensing samples, can you give an example use case? So do you distribute for specific researchers or specific project? What is the, because you said, says creating a distribution protocol, selecting it, it's all that is a long process. So I mean, the reason we did that was to capture the distribution of samples for a particular.
I can't hear you.
Oh, okay. Let me. Is this better?
Yes.
Yeah. No, I was just trying to find what is your distribution use case. So do you,
So if I want to dispense a sample, going back to like our test, our play mode, picking here, then selecting a cart, put it in the cart, then coming back to the cart, selecting that, then going to distribute, then selecting a distribution, then assigning it a name, whatever that name would be. Let's say it's going to be test 3. God.
no, that's fine. So what you meant is you should be directly able to select specimens and dispense the samples right from the cart.
Right.
Or
I mean, it should be fairly quick. I mean, to include all of that information should be pretty easy. I was really kind of surprised that you couldn't do that almost all in one screen, as opposed to going from from the specimen record all the way back to a cart, then dispensing it from there. I mean, it just seems
Sure,
seems
sure.
like a lot of work for 4 screens to get there.
Yeah, yeah, makes
And then
sense.
even, yeah. And then even from here to get to a shipping record, I have to go back and select that protocol again to create a shipping record, and then receiving, and et cetera, et cetera. So to actually track all of this, it just seems like a lot of work overall. So on the back end, if I want to do reporting on these samples, like where did they go, or overall finance records at the end of the year, it works really well because you've had to basically master going through all of these steps, no doubt about that, but on a day-to-day basis, that's a lot of work for doing something very simple.
Sure, sure. Yeah, we will think about how to make it simpler. Yeah. Okay. Did you have anything else to add?
The other one thing about OpenSpecimen that has been really interesting to deal with is the diagnoses. So let's just pull up. Okay.
And this is probably more than something that we want to share. We want to ask the other community users to see how they're dealing with. So I'll let Coleen finish off what she was going to say.
Just real quick, so the clinical diagnoses at the visit level, I was really kind of surprised how many there were and how many repeats there were of the same diagnoses. Like when we actually went back and looked at them, the difference between, like let's say, type in a simple one, lymphoma. Like why are there two of the same thing? It's just one says disorder. And if I go back to WHO guidelines, one of the two is now not appropriate per their guidelines. So why does one exist and the other one doesn't exist? So that's something that we've had to deal with on our own end, create guidelines on which ones to use. And since there's over 1,700 or even 17,000, I can't really remember, I mean, that's a lot of work on our end to actually create guidelines for just this one field. So that's the last thing I have to add.
So we were thinking if the other community users have done something different, like where they're pulling these clinical diagnoses from their EMR system and linking them, or something on those lines. Has anyone tried?
Does Matt have any idea? Probably he's the senior most here.
This is Matt. As far as clinical diagnoses for that particular field, I can say that that particular field probably isn't used a whole lot by our users. I think if they want to annotate some specific diagnosis or research data to their specimen, we've been accommodating that with like very minimal and basic annotation forms at this point. I think it is, as informatics continue to evolve here, we might look at ways to create interfaces between OpenSpecimen and other clinical and research applications. But those projects are still in the pipeline for us.
Can you expand on what are the fields in your annotation form, Matt?
Sure. So it varies based on each research team. So what we do is we'll meet with a study team and determine what are their requirements and what types of annotation they might need to their specimens. Off the top of my head, there are a couple of clinical diagnoses specific to hepatocellular carcinoma that we've accommodated for one group that studies that disease. But in short, it's variable and it depends on the research team and their needs.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, and the other thing we have done recently is this was nomad coding, and in the recent version we have changed it to ICD-10 coding. I
Okay.
don't know if that would help any
Yes.
much better. Yeah.
So will some of these diagnoses, especially these repeats, go away?
Actually, not in the upgrade, but yeah, we need, because we don't know how to do the mapping for the older values. But if you install fresh of OpenSpecimen, it has ICD-10, and yeah, it does not have all these repeats as much as I have seen.
Because I'm having a cancer registrar right now go through and actually sign the ICD-10 diagnoses codes
Right.
to, yeah, because our thought right now for some of our older specimens that weren't, the diagnosis tracked, but it was tracked in a text field, and it would be just an utter pain to try to map it to what we currently have, is use the tumor registry data that's already coded and then just code it back to the specimen records based on the MRN. So, I mean, I'd be willing to share that information with you.
Sure, sure. Yeah, we can take it offline, and we can discuss about that if you need any help.
Okay.
Okay. Any other things you wanted to add? Anything else you want to discuss?
I guess that's all we plan to talk. So unless anyone has any questions and would like to look into our painful story, we are more than happy to share offline.
Yeah,
I would
yeah.
say painful story because it's painful initially, but once we get there, then it's going to be a happy story. So
Yeah, we've been there many times when we work with clients to do migration. We know how much pain they go through to clean up the data. So it's really exciting to see how much data you have now in OpenSpecimen. Thanks a lot, Coleen and Dinesh. We really appreciate you presenting this. I'll take
Sure.
back the control.